It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 488 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record, where I hold in-depth conversations with today's leading experts in sales, marketing, and leadership 6 days a week. If you like the show, please really help us out if you take a second. Subscribe to the show, left a review for us. You can do that all with the podcast app on the phone you're listening to this podcast on right now. So go ahead, hit pause, subscribe, leave a quick review. We'd really appreciate it. Then come right back. We'll be waiting for you. Joining me today on Accelerate for the second time is Kevin Davis. Kevin's the president of Top Line Leadership and author of multiple books, including his latest, The Sales Manager's Guide to Greatness, 10 Essential Strategies for Leading Your Team to the Top. On his first appearance on Accelerate, we discussed 5 of Kevin's 10 essential strategies for sales managers. Today, we're going to have a conversation about the remaining 5. Kevin Davis, welcome back to Accelerate.
Well, thank you so much, Andy. Great to be here.
So, a lot's gone on since the last time we spoke. You've released your new book.
Yes, 2 days ago. The Sales Manager.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say it. The Sales Manager's Guide to Greatness, 10 Essential Strategies for Leading Your Team to the Top. And so how's it going?
Hey, it's going great. Got some great feedback. There's some terrific reader reviews that are posted on the book's Amazon page. And this is my third book, and it's always interesting to me what learned readers pull out as being meaningful and different. Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes different than what I thought they might pull out.
Well, I learned that lesson with my first book, and somebody actually asked me with my second book, well, so what's the book about? And I said, well, let me have some people read it first, and then I'll tell you, because I have to admit, I shifted how I presented the book, the first book, after having a bunch of people read it. It was the first 2 weeks is out and got all this feedback and reviews. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. they caught the key points maybe better than I even thought about it when I was writing.
Well, and obviously it has something to do with the challenges that they're facing as sales leaders with their teams, right? And that's always what people want, what readers want, is relevance. That's the first test. Can you provide me an idea, 2, 3, 5, 10, that I can actually implement tomorrow to improve the productivity of my sales team? And so,
let me ask you a question. So because we hear this all the time, is we need to increase our productivity of my sales team or the individuals. And so does it start with the individual or does it start with the manager?
Well, it starts. I don't see how you can say it starts with one versus the other. Essentially, the manager has enormous influence, hopefully positively, but possibly negatively, on the performance and productivity of every salesperson. But, at the end of the day, it's the internal drive and the willingness to engage and get proactive that determines the success of a salesperson. So ultimately, it's a collaboration, and if it's not, then sales suffer.
Well, can managers motivate salespeople? I mean, there's a school of thought that says that motivation is purely an internal drive, and that it's not really, it's not driven by externalities, if you will. What's your thought on that?
So my thought is that managers can influence the internal motivation of a salesperson through proactive sales coaching. I mean, the top 4 internal motivators are achievement, the desire to get more, recognition, the challenge of the work itself, and the opportunity for increased responsibility. Those are the 4 top internal motivating drives.
Now, is money one of those? Was achievement the same as money?
Okay, so those 4 are from Herzberg's work at the University of Utah that was published way back in 1960, study of white collar workers,
Right.
that was published in the Harvard Business Review, but yeah, money would absolutely be a fifth. So especially in the sales profession. So there you go. Those are the internal drive. But I guess my point is that sales managers, the way they coach and interact with their salespeople, can absolutely touch and influence every single one of those motivators. So the concern I have when anybody says, you really can't motivate somebody else is it causes a sales manager to stop trying. And then they perhaps aren't as proactive as they ought to be in terms of interacting with their salespeople and trying to motivate them. But the flip side of the coin, Andy, is that we absolutely know that sales managers can demotivate people.
Well, yeah. I mean, you reference a study with 1,500 salespeople surveyed, saying that the managers are better at selling than they are at managing. So, I mean, tell us about that survey. I mean, I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, well, they wanted to do a survey of their 1,500 salespeople. This is an office technology company, and get some feedback on their sales managers. They had 80 questions in the survey, and it came back. And the number one highest ranked item that salespeople thought of their sales managers was that my manager wants me to be successful. So that's great. It means that sales manager's heart is in the right place. But number 80 out of 80, in other words, sales managers were rated dead last in my manager provides me feedback and coaching that helps me get better. So in other words, my manager's heart is in the right place, but I'm not getting the help I need to become more effective as a salesperson. And also in my book, I drill down on the top 5 versus the bottom 5. And the top 5 were all sales behaviors, great in a meeting, great with customers, terrific in presentations. And the bottom 5 deals with underperformers well. That did really poorly. Doesn't provide me the feedback like I already said. We're all part and parcel of effective sales management. Assesses my performance on a regular basis and keeps me informed as to what the company's expectations of me are. These types of items that are essential to effective sales management were the bottom 5 out of 80 questions in a survey of 1,500 salespeople. And one question for any sales manager or sales leader out there is to just ask yourself, how many books and seminars have you attended on the science of selling, on the sales process? And I often get number 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever. Well, then how many have you events or books have you read on effective sales management techniques and behaviors? And there's just, sometimes you hear crickets. There's nothing, or maybe one. So it shouldn't be a big surprise that many sales managers are much better salespeople than they are sales leaders.
Yeah, and so this brings up an interesting question, which is, we sort of oftentimes conflate this idea of a sales leader and sales leadership and sales management. I mean, in your book, are they the same? Are these distinct skills? Because as you go through your list of 80 there, some of those to me seem like real leadership capabilities. Others seem more like sort of detailed management issues.
Well, ultimately, you need to be both a manager and a leader. And I would suggest that, how many different definitions of leadership exist out there, but I would define it in 2 ways. First, there's the management of sales performance. That's where we sit down and review the activity level, the results, and the pipeline, and what a salesperson has been doing. Okay. Then there is the leadership of interacting with our people in such a way that helps them get better going forward. So management is oftentimes looking in the rearview mirror, which we need to do. We need to manage the performance. That's where we communicate expectations, provide feedback, but it's oftentimes feedback pointed to the past. Leadership is really about coaching and helping your salespeople get better going forward, and kind of a future-focused thought process, so that when we have an interaction with a salesperson, we're actually asking more questions. We're trying to understand their current level of proficiency on this particular issue. And we're, instead of telling them what to do, we're asking questions and posing alternatives to get their input on and their thought process, so that the goal is not so much to, win the ABC deal. It's, yes, we want to help them win that deal, but we also want to help make sure that this conversation is building their skills for future. Because ultimately, what sales managers need to be most concerned about is not how effective your sales rep is when you are with him or her, but how effective they are when you are not with them, which is the vast majority of time. And that means we've got to get more out of every coaching leadership opportunity with every one of the people on our team.
Well, so it first starts with making those opportunities available. I mean, there's certainly pushback in some quarters, which I think is nuts. I hear it from top sales leaders saying, we're not spending as much time on one-on-ones. We're just not sure there's value there. And I'm thinking, okay, well, how are you coaching people if you're not doing one-on-ones? And granted, they may be talking in some degree about, one-on-one deal coaching and, so on, pipeline review, but you got to you have to be there one-on-one with this person to coach them. Otherwise, how can you do that? How can you ask the questions that help them learn? You can't do that in a group setting.
No, you can't. And if one tries, chances are whatever you say is going to, cause friction with more than one person that you're communicating with. So, but again, for example, if you do a loss review, right? You which I believe is the key responsibility of the sales manager. So suppose one of your salespeople loses a sizable deal. It's important for the sales manager to be the one to pick up the phone, call the customer that was just lost, and say, hey, if in the spirit of getting better, could you talk to us for just 15 minutes over the phone? We'd like to try to learn what we can do to get better. And because ultimately the salesperson who's dejected about losing that deal is not going to ask the right questions of the customer that will reveal what we did perhaps wrong along the way. So it's a sales manager's responsibility, I believe, to do that, and then to extract the nuggets of wisdom and share them with everybody on the team. So in that way, we can share ideas to help better define best practices, but that would just be one example of that.
Well, you had an interesting point in there, which I thought was worth expanding on a little bit, is that if you ask most people what a loss deal review or loss review is they'd say, the manager would sit down with the rep, we go through it and so on. But what I like what you just said is that, well, no, we're going to talk to the customer, because what you're going to get from the rep is not going to be remembered correctly. And that's just human nature. It's not that they're trying to deceive you, though in some cases some reps may, but I'm saying in the main, people just, once they leave, and the science has shown this, once people have an experience and walk away from it, they don't remember it very accurately.
Yeah. And if you ask the salesperson why we lost the deal, they're going to say price. All the reasons will always come back to not my responsibility as a sales rep, right? They're going to affix reasons outside of themselves and that's just human nature. And they've got a loss, and I mean, it's late in the game. We come in as managers, and we oftentimes cast judgment on the sales rep, so they're already on the defensive. So yeah, you got to talk to the customer on large losses, and if the customer won't talk to you, then that tells you something about the relationship your sales rep was able to establish with that customer as they worked on that campaign.
Well, yeah, it tells you they were never in the deal to begin with.
Right.
if that's the case. Yeah, I remember I've told the story before. I've written about it. As I was on a train once from New York to Boston, and this guy gets on the train. I'm sitting in my seat. The train hasn't left Penn Station yet in New York, and this guy comes running in. He's got the cell phone pressed to his ear, dressed in a suit, looks nice. And, the words I heard out of him were, yeah, well, the buyers were just liars. and I'm sitting there, I look at my my phone, and it's the last day of the month. And so clearly you could just tell from this guy's end of the conversation, he was talking to his boss and had committed this deal was going to close. And obviously it didn't close. And to your point, yeah, it just wasn't his fault at all.
No.
The buyers were just liars.
But again, in the defense of the salesperson, one of the reasons that salespeople respond that way is how we sales managers interact with them. I mean,
sure. Absolutely.
If we are not doing real-time coaching, and so right now the NCAA basketball tournament is going on, and the Final Four is this weekend, and everybody in the United States is tuned to the great basketball tournament. And in that game, you see coaches really coach. I mean, they're on the sidelines, they're watching their players play, they call a timeout, they go to a player, they give some advice. They're certainly contribute advice from the sideline during the real time of the game, but that's coaching. And when we sit down with a sales rep once a month to review what's happened, that's in my eye, that's the management piece. It's great to provide, but any feedback you give somebody is too late. It's disconnected from whatever skill, strategy, or thought or action they took with a customer that might have happened weeks ago. And so our feedback, see, this is kind of an issue here, because how many sales managers coach is perceived by salespeople as criticism. And that's because the feedback we are providing is disconnected from real time. And so therefore, it's not specific enough to be helpful. So the rep is therefore not motivated to implement it. But it's also about, accountability, right? We as sales managers want a more accountable sales team, but accountability to us means kind of coming in and when something bad happens as a way to affix blame. And so it's what I would suggest is, and that's one of the chapters in my book, is really how to repackage accountability into very much of a positive for your sales team, and really define future perfect and point accountability as leaders direct to the future, and not so much to, what did you do wrong? Why did you not do that right? That type of, or you're not making enough calls, or I'm, blah, blah, blah.
Well, and I think it's right. But I think what you're driving at, and at least what I see is, and correct me if maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is as managers, you talked about earlier, and you have a section in your book about asking questions. And you talked about it earlier, yeah, when you start giving advice about, well, I think this is what you should be doing, there is a very critical viewpoint implicit in that, right? What you're saying is you've got a shortcoming. This, you should do it the way I would do it, basically, is what they're saying. And you have to be, as a coach, as a manager, is you have to ask the questions that help the person figure it out, what's going to work for them. And I harken back to, I worked for one CEO at a startup years ago, one of the smartest guys I ever worked for. And he was perfectly prepared. And this was a startup that we didn't have a lot. We were self-funded. We, just got by on our profits month after month. And we were growing, but still, he was perfectly prepared to lose a deal, to keep his mouth closed and lose a deal in order for somebody to learn a lesson rather than speak up and tell them exactly what to do.
Wow. Well, that's a great attribute. And in my book, I talk about my first sales manager who also understood that principle, Andy. And I noticed when I was a rookie sales rep that he was, every time we'd go in to meet with a customer, he would pull a coin out of his pocket and he'd put it in the crook of his hand. And I didn't really understand it. Didn't think much about it until 3 years later when I was promoted to sales manager. Mm-hmm. And I called him up and I asked him, hey, why did you always put that coin in your hand? He says, well, Kevin, when you started out, you were lousy.
So what'd the coin have to do with that?
But I knew, this is him talking. He says, but I knew that in order for you to learn and grow, I had to resist the temptation to jump in and take over. And so I would put that coin in the palm of my hand. And the worse and worse you did, the harder and harder I would squeeze. Because, Kevin, I needed to create a point of physical pain that was greater than the pain I felt watching you screw up the meeting.
I love it. I love it.
So just kind of the tail end of that is anybody listening, I would, clearly if you go with a sales rep, you're in a large deal, you have an agreement before you go in on the meeting, what role you're going to play, and do your very best to stick to it. But squeeze that quarter until it hurts. Don't jump in too quickly. Because when you do, you just destroy any opportunity for coaching, and you send a message to the customer that your sales rep is lousy.
Exactly.
And I mean, it's just all around a bad thing. So resist the temptation. Let the thing play out a little longer, and then if you see you need to jump in, but then pass it back. So give a little more thought to this because. When you jump in, you just defeat any opportunity to help the sales rep grow.
Oh, yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, it's as you said, it's very hard for managers to do that, but they have to understand, first of all, why, as you said, why they're on the call. Why are they participating? Why are they there? And what's that role going to be? That needs to be defined ahead of time.
Well, and this gets back to kind of one of the key points I write about in the first chapter of my book, which is, how great, the problem is that sales managers were first and foremost great salespeople, and they kind of get an adrenaline rush out of those behaviors. But making that transition to leadership is not just getting the title. It's also getting a new mindset where you realize that, what type of work do you value most in yourself and in your day? Is it the thrill of jumping in and turning a difficult situation with a customer into a win? That's a sales behavior. Or is it interacting with a sales rep who used to be successful but has since fallen on hard times? And how you engage with that person in such a way that you turn them around, get them recommitted, get them refocused on their goals. Right? What turns you on? And I would say that there are a lot of sales managers out there who are still selling and they haven't made that mental transition to what is, every time you do something that someone else can do, you prevent the accomplishment of something that only you can do. And as a sales manager, only you can coach and develop your people. And we've just got to kind of get back to that and make sure that we're we're recognizing every day, this is a mindset. What can I do to help a sales rep get better today? How can I make this happen? And stay focused on that priority. And when you do that, in so doing, you will require these new leadership attributes, which I talk about.
Well, and maybe the point is, and this isn't talked about enough, is that there's no shame if you are promoted to a manager to say, I love sales, but this being a manager isn't for me. And so what I oftentimes see happen is that, somebody gets promoted to be a manager. It doesn't work out for them. And for whatever reason, right? Maybe just don't have the mindset. Maybe they really, really need to be a salesperson. Mm-hmm. That's okay. But oftentimes what you see is they sort of wash out of the sales profession. Instead of saying, I can go back to being a sales rep. I mean, if I do well, I'll make a ton of money, as much money or more than I'd make as a manager. It can be a satisfying, fulfilling career. I mean, it's what I stand for. It's who I am. I mean, to me, that I've known lots of people have made that shift back and have been extremely successful, extremely happy, much more happy than they were when they were trying to be a manager, when they just felt like they're beating their head against the wall. And it's okay. Know who you are, I think, is really important. I mean, it's exciting to get promoted, but it's not for everybody. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It's just not for you.
Well, great topic, because I literally just a few days ago published a blog titled How to Get Promoted to Sales Manager. And there are 5 key steps that anybody who wants to become a sales manager, I would advise them to take. And because even though, Andy, you've seen sales managers, people move into sales management and not work out and go back. I mean, think how costly that is. I mean, why take this leap from an uninformed perspective? Why not learn what great sales managers do differently? Why not become aware of what are the things that I need to do now in order to build my skills in such a way that I can be a better sales manager later, but also build my awareness as to what that job entails so that I have a little better understanding of whether or not I even want it.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, but in some cases, you're just not going to know. It may not be your first level management job. Maybe you do well and you get promoted to the next level and it's just not for you. I mean, you just have to have this self-awareness. Really understand who you are, what you stand for, what it is you're trying to accomplish. And I call this mine because it's I don't know, the last couple of weeks, reconnected with some people online, or they reached out to me to reconnect, or they wanted to follow me, excuse me, on LinkedIn or connect on LinkedIn. And, they're listening to this podcast. And they're people I've known for decades. And in some cases, they had been several steps into their sales management careers. But then you look over the last 20 years, they had just gone back to what they had done best. And they've been, senior sales executives, sales account executives for, some pretty major tech companies and so on. And that had been their life. And they make a ton of money and, so on.
Yep.
And that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not the same path for everyone.
No. And that's oftentimes perhaps a lifestyle choice, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had my mentor, actually, a guy that one of the most influential people in my career, was vice president of sales at a tech startup I worked for. I worked directly for him. And after that experience, he just decided he had had enough and, took 2 steps back and was perfectly content.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, Kevin, it's been great talking to you again. So tell folks how they can find out more about your book and how they can get in contact with you.
Sure. Certainly send me an invite on LinkedIn. The book is titled The Sales Manager's Guide to Greatness. It's available wherever books are sold. It's on Amazon, of course, and currently stocked in Barnes & Noble's stores throughout North America, and other leading booksellers. You can follow me on Twitter at Kevin F. Davis. Middle initial is in F as in Frank. Kevin at Kevin F. Davis. I blog regularly. Have a website, kevinfdavis.com. Got like this blog I just mentioned, the one about how to get promoted to sales manager. That's there. But I'm just writing articles and focused on leading a sales team and how to do that more effectively, which obviously involves two critical components, right? Leading ourselves, making some changes in terms of how we manage ourselves and lead ourselves, and then of course how we interact with our people. So there's lots of stuff there, and I also have some videos up on YouTube, sales management training videos. So just pop up on YouTube and search Kevin F. Davis, and there's some great ones there, like, why great salespeople often fail as sales managers.
As we just talked about, yeah. So, good. Well, Kevin, again, thank you very much. And for folks who didn't catch the title of his book, it's The Sales Manager's Guide to Greatness, 10 Essential Strategies for Leading Your Team to the Top. And again, Kevin, thank you. And friends, thank you for joining us today. Please come back. Join us again tomorrow. In the meantime, if you haven't done so already, please go to iTunes, leave a review for this podcast. Really appreciate your feedback. Subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. And we'll look forward to seeing you again here tomorrow. So thanks again for joining me. And until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.